Well, that's not easy to follow, Harold. And I don't have a cane. I feel naked without a cane here. Okay. Well, it is my great pleasure to move to the other prize that is awarded this evening and every other year in Oklahoma, and that is for the English Jueju. The Jueju form is one of the most beloved Chinese genres of writing. And because we have friends from far away coming here, I'd like to read a poem for Xixi, a Jueju, and a brief translation first by Li Bai. This is done as a yin song or yin shi, and the person who I learned this from was from Hong Kong. I'll be doing it, however, not in Guangdonghua, not in Cantonese, but in Mandarin. 朝辞白帝彩云间，千里江陵一日还。两岸猿声啼不住，轻舟已过万重山。We leave the city of Baidi at dawn under multicolored clouds. The journey to Jiangling is 1,000 li. We'll make it in a single day. From both sides of the river, apes cry without end. But from our small boat, we've already passed 10,000 mountains. The Jueju normally is translated like that, in free verse, to try to capture its depth. It is impossible, it has been said, to do so in English. The Jueju challenges some of our ideas about that, so I will now Lansong, another poem by Li Bai, a very famous poem. Both of these genres are winners for the Jueju in English this year. So the other poem is a Wu Jue 5 by the same poet Li Bai, but I won't sing this one. 船前明月光，疑是地上霜。举头望明月，低头思故乡。Moonlight fall near bed, as if frost there spread. Lift gaze, find bright moon, miss old home-hang head. The root of Chinese poetics is the monosyllable. You have to have every word with one syllable, one vowel. The English vowel, like the Chinese vowel, has long and short. The basic patterns of Jueju, or Lu Shi, Wu Yan Shi, Qi Yan Shi, these forms of Tang poetry that Harold Newman and many of us love, is built on an alternation of yin and yang in ways that I will talk about in relation to the poems that were written and winning this evening. So I want to go ahead and introduce each one of our winners. I'll read their poem, and while they're coming up to get their photos taken, I also would like to talk a little bit about each one. So I will start with our adult winner. Now, the adult category had submissions. There were hundreds of submissions across 4 categories: elementary school, middle school, high school, and college adult. The oldest college adult was 83. We had a number of OU alumni who submitted Jueju, and we had this winner. The winner is Shane McClendon, English teacher at Millwood High School and OU alum. His poem is entitled Red Dirt. It goes like this. Red dirt, tall trees, clear wild plains, dry dust, old leaves, bare raw grains, cool rain, low clouds, full hearts watch, land loved, ground lost, where man claims. So first of all, it's a beautiful poem. But before you come up, I want to just explain something that you can't hear with your ears. But if you look at your programs, you can follow along with me. What Shane has done is he's also done Dui Lian. If you look at the first, second, and third line, just the first words, you have red dirt, underneath it you have dry dust, cool rain. So the Lu Shi, or the regulated verse, alternates between parallelism and anti-parallelism. So you have red, dry, against cool, dirt, dust, against rain, right? This form of writing thus means that you must compose the poem horizontally and vertically at the same time. So inside the poem is a belief in a principle of harmony. Now what I haven't said yet is that the Jueju, as well as the Wuyanshi and other forms of Tang poetry in the Tang Dynasty, were brought into the civil service examination system. And this is true. In order to have a job in government, you needed to be a good poet. For most Americans, that sounds pretty unusual. But the idea, of course, is that in politics and statecraft, the ability to harmonize the elements, 5 elements of cosmology, the yin and yang in the world, must first and foremost be done in the substrate of consciousness, language. What is a human being but language? What is society but language? Right? So a poem that regulates language by harmonizing its different categories is a diagnostic for one's ability to attune oneself to the Tao, to the way of nature. If you can put your own self into harmony, then you will resonate like a tuning fork, and others around you will also become one with the Tao, right? And the more powerful you are, the more big your resonance is. A good leader will make a good country, right? How do you test that? So poetry was one of those. This poetry that Shane produced is a great example of that. So please welcome our winner for our adult category. And if I could invite Joellen and Harold Newman to come up to confer the prize, please, that would be wonderful. So thank you. Each winner receives a plaque signed by the president of the University of Oklahoma and $500. It's not bad for 28 words. Right. Our next category is the category of high school. Again, with hundreds of submissions, it's of course really difficult to choose a winner. But one of the things about a poetry competition usually is that it's quite subjective, you know. But actually, writing Jueju is a bit like science or math. It's so complicated that it's actually quite clear what a great poem is. Hence, why it was used as a diagnostic for civil service. This particular poem was chosen because it did one of the most important things a Jueju must do, and that is to balance the jing and the qing. That is, the feeling that you have inside with nature outside. One of the things that it's difficult to understand at first about Chinese poetry is that it is not built on the metaphor, or simile, or personification. They're there, but in fact, the primary figure of speech is to balance the internal world and the external world. So think of it this way. When you look out the window and you see a landscape, it may be the same landscape, but two people with different feelings inside will see two different landscapes. And yet the landscape also does form us. So there is a oneness here in poetry. Every poem, more or less, reveals that we are environment, and environment is us. And nothing can be a scene without being seen first. And so this poem, I think, is a really good example of an interiority and an exteriority. And so here it is. Our winner is Ari Johnson from Norman High. The poem is Winter Sight. White snow, Tall trees, sun shines bright. Warm coat, cold nose, breeze is light. Young girls hold hands, sing so soft. Still world, lone wolf, birds take flight. It's a beautiful poem. The poem's third line, there are 4 lines. Each line vertically has to do a certain thing. The first line introduces nature. The second line must deepen and extend that scene. The third line reveals the poet's interiority, forcing you to reconceptualize the first 2 lines. The fourth line lands the poem. It concludes the poem. And so we only see nature in the first 2 lines, but in that third line, you are first introduced to the girls and to the sense of touch and so on, and allows us to really feel what that nature meant. And of course, the final line I thought was just stunning. Such a beautiful poem. So please, again, if we can get one more clap for this wonderful poet, Ari Johnson, if you'll come up to get your award. Middle school. Wow, this was a battleground this year, I have to say. Over 220 submissions in the middle school category, if you can imagine. And the middle school winner, in fact, did a 5-character Jueju instead of a 7-word. So it's different, it looks different. Same basic principles apply to both. This poem was chosen in part because of the 100-year anniversary. You see, Jueju is the engine of American modernism, as I've mentioned. Without Jueju, without Li Bai and Du Fu's poetry, English poetry would still be rhymed and metered and sounding like the Victorians. It was the reading of this work that liberated English to a new way to hear itself and to see itself. And so this poem was just such an exquisite work of imagism that it compelled this juror to vote for it. Here is the poem by Carly Wilcox from Noble Middle School. And the poem is Deep Sea Shark. Gray shark, light 10 shine. Thin teeth, short point, fine. Blue pool, sea life thrive. Dark seas, deep salt brine. It's a beautiful poem. Now, the poem, a few quick things to point out about the images here. First of all, how many of you knew that sharks were the color of 10? But they are, aren't they? Right? This is about what we were talking about poetry, about just the human condition and stopping for a moment and sinking down and noticing. And of course, this poem also works with my metaphor of going down into the deep. And the last line, the dark seas, the deep salt brine, so unexpected. Such a perfect way to end the poem. So please welcome Carly Wilcox for it. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad to have you guys up here. Our final winner this evening is from the elementary school category. Now, you can write Jueju in many ways, as I've suggested. In fact, Li Bai and Du Fu, some of them were regulated verse and some of them were not. Some of them followed the rules and sometimes not. But the rules were there. And a few poets like Han Yu was very good at writing in those rules. In the history of this prize, and I've been teaching Jueju, English Jueju, for 22 years. In the history, in fact, of my experience teaching this form across many different populations and ages, this is the only poem I've read that, in fact, is perfect. Perfect in terms of both accomplishing following the rules and for being a beautiful poem. I'll read it first, and then I'll explain how and why, because it is quite amazing. So here's the poem. The winner is Tobin Bossi. He's a homeschool elementary school student here from Norman, Oklahoma. The poem is called Oasis. Hot sand, dry gust quick, rough wheeze. Oh, sorry, I have to start again because the space is wrong, but I'll show you where it's supposed to be. Quick, if you want to put a little line between quick, it should be there. Hot sand, dry gust, quick, rough wheeze. Pale earth, warm air, swift, crisp breeze. Pure light, deep joy, worn, soft heart. Lost pool, still glass, stout green trees. Now, one of the things that I added this year was to include the rules of Pingze. Now, Pingze is where you don't only balance parallelism of the meaning. So we can look at that just like Shane did in his poem, the hot sand, pale earth, pure light, dry, warm, deep. There's some parallelism happening in the meaning, but look at the sound. It will be hard for you to hear it, but I've made a little map here of the yin and yang tones. So it goes like this. Yin yang, yang yin 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 yang. Yang yin, yang yang, yin yin yang. Yang yin, yin yang, yang yin yin. Yin yang, yang yin, yin yang yang. Now, I can't do this for you, but if you look vertically, they're mirrors of each other. And so English and Chinese both have long and short vowels, as I've mentioned, but none of us know this because we don't need to know this. But the Chinese poets learned this, and so they would always build their poems balancing the sound, both in a horizontal pattern and in a vertical pattern. The complexity of this, as I've talked to our young winner, took 1 week and many, many trials. And I'm just here to say it is really one of the humbling and wonderful experience to read a poem like this from one of our winners. So please welcome the mighty Tobin Bossi. Have a seat and enjoy the rest of